that the committee now immediately those involved in the creation or execution of the nearly $1.8 billion slush fund.
Some bipartisan consensus on bald-faced corruption.
Bad news. We're going to try to kill it.
As the president declares his fund open for business.
We think that anybody involved in that process should partake.
Tonight, Joe Neguse on the congressional response and Officer Daniel Hodges on his lawsuit to stop J6 criminals from getting paid. Then, the growing concern Trump's trying to J6 the midterms.
I said, I'm going to be here in 28. Maybe I'll be here in 32, too. I don't know. Maybe I will.
And as the White House lays the groundwork in Cuba, new reporting on who they wanted to run Iran.
You said, is there any art more beautiful, more divine, more eternal than the art of the martyr's death?
When All In starts right now. Good evening from New York. I'm Chris Hayes. The outrage over Donald Trump's plan to just help himself to $1.776 billion of your money is building. By the hour, by the day, $1.776 billion, right? 1776, get it? It is a settlement, in scare quotes, of Trump's IRS lawsuit, although not approved by a judge, he just rescinded the lawsuit, offered to him by his own government, the one he controls, in order to dole out to his insurrectionist friends. And really, just to be clear, if you read the text of the settlement, to anyone, anywhere, as the commission sees fit. Yesterday, both Vice President J.D. Vance and Todd Blanche, former Trump criminal defense attorney, who now serves as acting attorney general, who's going to oversee this fund, worked hard to make the deal seem reasonable, and they failed abjectly. Today, you've got Republicans coming out against it on Capitol Hill.
It doesn't look right. You can't do it that way when you're negotiating with yourself and for yourself.
What do you make of this $1.7 billion fund for
bad news? We're going to try to kill it.
You're going to try and kill it?
Yep.
Wow.
It is as if somebody sued themselves and agreed upon a settlement with themselves that's going to be funded by the rest of us. Now, if that's the case, what? Wait a second. I just came off the campaign trail. People are concerned about making their own ends meet, not about putting a slush fund together without a legal precedent.
That's a Republican calling Trump's settlement a slush fund, and another one threatening to kill it. Even the top Republican in the Senate, the one who sets the body's agenda, is sounding skeptical.
What are your thoughts about this weaponization fund from the president at this point?
Yeah, not a big fan. And I'm not sure exactly how they intend to use it, but my understanding is that was just announced. And, but yeah, I don't see a purpose for that. I don't see a purpose for that.
So just, in 24 hours, you have a significant number of Republicans in key positions that are turning against this brazenly corrupt act out of a brazenly corrupt administration. And it's just one development of many today showing the very quickly building backlash to this madness. I mean, you heard it from Senator Cassidy, again, who's a bit untethered now, right? He lost his primary. He's not going to be in the Senate. In fact, 2 police officers who were assaulted on January 6th filed suit today to stop it. We're going to talk to one of those officers in just a few minutes. But I think, again, when this first came out, it was so strange that it was kind of shocking, but also I think a lot of people were like, wait, what? Could this? So today it's really sinking in for people what this is. Not only is Donald Trump stealing $1.8 billion of your money, of all of our money, that could go to any number of things to make people's lives better, just straight up withdrawing it from the Treasury. There will be a transfer from the Treasury, draining the bank account that our money sits in. He is very likely to give it out to the people who violently stormed the Capitol on his behalf in an attempt to steal an election, in a biggest, gravest threat to the constitutional order since the Civil War. The people, you remember, who beat police officers, people who sought to harm elected officials, people who were convicted of seditious conspiracy against the United States, one of the rarest and most serious crimes in the entire federal code, plotting to use violence to overthrow the government. As the New York Times reports, many convicted and pardoned rioters are, as you might imagine, elated at the possibility they're going to get some of that sweet moolah, that a payout is going to be coming their way. In some cases, as we've been tracking, many of those rioters that Trump pardoned have gone on to commit other crimes since January 6th, including some really, really heinous ones, the most heinous, arguably, like child sexual assault. For instance, Kenny Brian Lazo, before his conviction and pardon, got a pardon for raiding the Capitol, Lazo was arrested again in 2021 on multiple charges of sexually assaulting a child under 13. Details of that case were sealed to protect the victim. And like Andrew Taki, who was convicted of assaulting Capitol Police with bear spray and a metal whip, last year he pleaded guilty to online solicitation of a minor in exchange for time served. And like Kyle Travis Colton, he pleaded guilty to disorderly and disruptive conduct for his role in the insurrection. You see him there in those shots, storming the Capitol. Well, last year he was sentenced to 6 years in prison after police found what they called copious images and videos depicting graphic sexual abuse of young children. Like Daniel Tochi, who was sentenced to 4 years in March for possessing more than 100,000 child sexual abuse images and videos. Before he pleaded guilty, Tochi's attorney tried to have the case thrown out by arguing, get this, that all the evidence stemmed from the January 6th case and was covered by his presidential pardon. And like Andrew Paul Johnson, Mr. Johnson was sentenced to life in prison in March on 5 charges, including molesting a child under 12 and another one under 16. Johnson reportedly tried to buy the silence of at least one of his victims by promising to pay them with, wait for it, money he thought he was going to be getting from the Trump Department of Justice as compensation or reparations for his January 6th prosecution. This is before the fund was even created, but it wasn't at all an unreasonable expectation. Trump has been telegraphing this from the beginning, and today he just came out and said it.
I guess they made a settlement of some kind. I wasn't involved in the settlement. I could have been involved, but I didn't choose to be. Well, I mean, people were destroyed. They went to jail. Their families were ruined. They committed suicide, and we're reimbursing those people for their legal fees and for their costs. We think that anybody involved in that process should partake. And you're talking about peanuts compared to the value.
I mean, anybody involved in the process, right? The process is convictions, charges for what happened on January 6th. So that would include the people who have been convicted or pleaded to sexually assaulting children. It would include the people that have assaulted police officers, beating them to within an inch of their life. It would include the people convicted of seditious conspiracy. That's what Trump's saying. And keep in mind here, the Department of Justice already paid off Trump's disgraced former national security advisor, Michael Flynn, more than $1 million of your dollars after the DOJ prosecuted him for lying to law enforcement. A crime, by the way, he pled guilty to. But he was pardoned by Trump. That $1 million was peanuts next to the millions they paid to the family of Ashley Babbitt, the Capitol rioter, who was shot and killed by law enforcement after trying to storm the Speaker's lobby, the first one through the door, while elected officials were still evacuating there with an enormous braying mob behind her. And now Trump has a $1.8 billion pool of money transferred from you to him by his own government. And so millions of dollars of taxpayer money will be flowing, it appears, as reparations. The country got reparations. Would you look at that? But January 6th reparations to a group that includes child sex offenders. How do you feel about the money going to those people? Your money going to those people. How do you feel about that? Senator Chris Van Hollen explicitly asked Todd Blanche to rule that specific scenario out yesterday, and he did not.
There's also an individual who, after being pardoned by the president, went on to molest 2 children. Can you commit to making the rule so that that person is not eligible for a payout under this fund?
Well, you're obviously lying in your question, because there's no way that this person committed to that. Because the slush fund, as you call it, which is not, didn't exist.
No, he wasn't lying. Blanche said the senator was lying because he wasn't lying. It's true, the slush fund hadn't existed yet. But this guy, the one who's doing life for multiple rapes of children, that guy thought the money was coming because Donald Trump telegraphed it was. And guess what? He guessed correctly, because the slush fund does exist now. So here's Senator Patty Murray simply stating the facts of that case.
I just have to tell you, this is corruption that has never been more blatant or more widespread. What is happening is you write the check, Trump and his cronies cash it, American taxpayers who are already being whacked with high prices are going to foot the bill. That's what we are seeing today, and that is what many of us are really, really angry about.
So what can be done to stop it? Well, a Democratic effort to subpoena Blanche and the other officials behind Trump's settlement failed this evening. That's because Republicans voted against it. But even Republicans are grumbling a little bit about the president's abuse of power. And so there's a chance that, as with the release of the Epstein files, Congress can file a discharge petition to block the slush fund. It is a legislative move that's incredibly rare, but before Donald Trump, so is impeachment. Congressman Joe Neguse of Colorado co-chairs the House Democrats Litigation Task Force, and he joins me now. Congressman, first, let's start on that subpoena vote. There was a vote to try to just get some more information. I mean, Trump says he wasn't involved. I find that a little hard to believe. Information about how this came about, what went down there, and how did that vote go?
Yeah, well, good to be with you, Chris. Thanks for having me on. As you noted, unfortunately, our Republican colleagues on the Judiciary Committee yet again capitulated to the whims of President Trump and ultimately our effort, led by Ranking Member Raskin, to subpoena Acting Attorney General Blanche, as well as a number of a bevy of Trump administration officials, to ultimately hold them accountable for this craven and brazen corruption, as you described. That vote failed. But I will also say to you that I think a very clear red line has been drawn in the sand, and you get the sense, as you covered in the opening moments of your show, that some Republicans, some, not all, but some, are finally beginning to realize the depths of, I think, this administration's corruption, which is just unprecedented. Part of it, I think, by the way, Chris, is animated by the reality that many of us, myself included, were in the Capitol complex on January 6th. Many of us were on the House floor. And to think that they are now going to proceed with this corrupt slush fund to essentially reward people who are convicted of attacking police officers and subverting the peaceful transfer of power, it's just beyond the pale. So I think you're going to see a muscular response on behalf of House Democrats in the Congress, multifaceted. Of course, as you mentioned, one of those tools that we'll use in our arsenal is potentially a discharge petition on legislation that's been introduced by Ranking Member Raskin, as well as other potential bills that I think will be introduced in the days and the weeks ahead. But we're also going to continue to fight this in court. And I'm grateful, I will say, to the brave Capitol Police officers who've initiated a lawsuit of their own to try to stop this from moving forward. The discharge petition avenue, which as I said in the open, I was sort of skeptical of for the many years that I've covered Congress, because it's always like, oh, we'll do a discharge petition, never happens. But, you know, we've seen several successful discharge petitions in the Trump era specifically. You know, you could already count a few votes. It seems Don Bacon, Fitzpatrick, that's two. Congressman Tom Keene is out right now with an unspecified illness. He hasn't voted in months, so the numbers are very, very thin. Do you see that as an avenue that might be fruitful? Short answer is yes. I mean, to your point about discharge petitions, not to get too into the legislative weeds, but to be clear, this Congress, the 119th Congress, since the beginning of the Trump administration, there have been more successful discharge petitions than in any point in the last century in the United States. So it is unprecedented, and part of that, of course, is by virtue of the compelling case that House Democrats are making on the floor each and every day. But also, it is just the reality of the, again, wholesale corruption that this administration is engaged in, the connective tissue behind so much of what they're doing. So, yeah, I anticipate that we're going to be able to move forward and make the case and hopefully build a coalition sufficient to stop this, either during the appropriations process or through a discharge petition. And look, hope springs eternal that more Republicans will ultimately join us. You saw in the Senate the Iran War Powers Resolution yesterday, which was successful by virtue of Senator Cassidy, now that he's been defeated in his primary nomination, deciding to join Democrats. I suspect you're going to see more of that both in the House and the Senate as the president wages his campaign against members of his own party.
Yeah, there's an ironic, strange paradox at the moment, which is that his power sort of over primary endorsements has never been stronger, but his power over the caucus is probably weaker, partly because his general approval is lower than it's ever been. I want to ask on that note that it does seem that the ballroom funding, which has been, I think it's fair to say, the president's #1 priority in this session of Congress, which is getting another $1 billion of taxpayer money for essentially the thing he wants, which is his ballroom. There's some reporting today that it's been pulled from the Senate side of this. Senator John Kennedy said that it's been stripped out, that they don't, that they didn't have the votes, and the parliamentarians struck it out. What do you think of that development?
Yeah, I mean, open question as to whether or not ultimately the ballroom funding is included in the reconciliation bill. I would just say more broadly, it is clear that Republicans, rank-and-file Republicans, are beginning to understand the political peril that they and they alone have created for themselves and their party by virtue of capitulating to President Trump at every turn. And they are so deeply unpopular now with the American public to think that they proceed with funding these vanity projects or supporting the president's corruption by virtue of this slush fund, the sedition fund, as you, I think, so aptly described it. I think they are beginning to realize that there will be electoral consequences come November. And so the hope will be that we might very well see some action both in the Senate and the House in terms of them deciding that their own political futures are perhaps more important than the president's. But time will tell.
All right, Congressman Joe Neguse, thanks for your time today. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Coming up, one of the officers injured on January 6th is suing to block Trump's slush fund. He joins me next. Police officers who defended the U.S. Capitol on January 6, 2021 are suing to block Donald Trump's new $1.8 billion fund to pay out insurrectionists and other so-called lawfare victims. The suit filed in D.C. District Court today begins, quote, "In the most brazen act of presidential corruption this century, President Donald J. Trump has created a $1.776 billion taxpayer-funded slush fund to finance the insurrectionists and paramilitary groups that commit violence in his name." It continues, quote, "The fund, styled the Anti-Weaponization Fund, is illegal. No statute authorizes its creation. The settlement on which it is premised is a corrupt sham, and its design violates the Constitution and federal law." Daniel Hodges is an officer with the Washington, D.C. Metropolitan Police Department. He's suing the Trump administration along with former Capitol Police Officer Harry Dunn. And Officer Hodges joins me now in his personal capacity. It's great to have you on, Officer. First, just your response when there's news about this kind of telegraphing that this settlement would come about. And at first it looked like maybe it would go to Trump himself. What was your reaction when you first started to see reports about what this fund what its intended use was?
I mean, it's obviously awful. It makes no sense. Why would we pay people who attacked the Capitol of the United States money for their trouble, right? But also, it wasn't surprising because Trump's been talking about how he wants to give these people money for a very long time now. And he controls all aspects of the government. Not enough people in government are willing to stop him, so he has no reason not to. So it seemed like an eventuality, but it's still, horrific.
What made you want to sue?
Just because I don't want these people to be rewarded for their crimes. And if they are rewarded, then it would just encourage them to commit more violence. Because for most of us, the things that stop us from fulfilling such dark, violent fantasies are ethics and belief in nonviolence, which these people have already proven that they lack. It's trust in the system, which these people don't have. It's fear of reprisal by the government, and Trump has pardoned them and made it clear that he has their backs no matter what they do. And it's a lack of resources, which these people would have if they're given millions and millions of dollars each. So it seems like we're just setting ourselves up for more further terrible political violence if these payments actually go through.
Yeah, you work in the Capitol still, am I right?
I am with the Metropolitan Police Department, but I am here in my personal capacity.
Yeah, you're an MPD. I mean, yeah, the idea of essentially incentivizing this kind of thing before, I think, does loom large. You just said it before, but it has to hang over you as you watch this play out.
Sure, yeah, especially those of us who have been vocal in, describing our experiences on January 6th have received all kinds of threats. Members have received threats. Family members have received harassment. People have sent me pictures of a diagram of committing suicide with my face pasted on top of the head in the diagram. Snuff films. People telling me that my time is up and a pale horse is coming for me, which is a reference to death from the Four Horsemen in the Bible. It just things that really make me feel like these people probably should not be given millions of dollars to enact their revenge fantasy.
That seems a sensible conclusion. Officer, I want to play you something that Todd Blanche had to say, in which he said that, hey, look, people who've harmed police officers get money all the time. What's the big deal here? Take a listen.
People that hurt police get money all the time. Okay, there's a process where if you believe you have your rights violated, you can apply for funds, you can sue, you can file a claim, you can go to court. In some of those cases, the state, the government, the federal government settles those cases. It's abhorrent to ever touch a law enforcement officer, which is why anytime anybody does that, and it's a federal officer, we'll prosecute them. But that's a completely different question with whether an individual is allowed to apply for a claim. Whether they'll get a claim, depends. I can't, it would not be appropriate for me to talk about absolutes.
My interpretation of that is that, sure, people that physically assaulted you and other officers that day are absolutely welcome to apply. Maybe they'll get money, maybe they won't, but it's not disqualifying. How do you hear that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not an expert on the details of the fund, but it sounds like it's just set up for very little oversight, very little judgment in the way of who's getting money, except for if they're allies to the president. And I believe there's some line in there that says that no one in the fund can be responsible for what happens with that money. So it's they're just trying to wash their hands of the whole thing while they're in the middle of doing it. And it's abhorrent to me.
There's going to be likely an amendment tried to offer it in the budget reconciliation bill from Senator Chris Van Hollen, who was grilling Blanche about this yesterday, to bar violent criminals from those payouts just explicitly. Do you think that would make sense?
I think that would make sense. I think that's a start, but I don't know why this, I can't really call it a settlement because it wasn't approved by the court. It's a slush fund. I don't know why anyone should get any money from this or why taxpayers should pay out almost $2 billion to people that Trump feels were victimized by Biden.
Was there any sort of formal compensation fund set up for officers like yourself who went through that day?
Not to my knowledge, no.
So nothing?
Nope. And we got paid for our work that day. We did our jobs.
Yeah.
I haven't heard anyone, saying that we should be getting millions of dollars. We did our jobs. I did my job. I got my paycheck for the day, and that's what I signed up to do. Obviously, it's not exactly what I signed to do, and I hope I never have to do it again. But it was our job, and we did it well.
Officer Daniel Hodges, one of the two plaintiffs on a lawsuit to block that slush fund that was filed today. Thank you for making a little time for us tonight. I really do appreciate it.
Thanks for having me on, Chris.
Still ahead, the emerging reality the president isn't really planning to win the midterms fairly, not even really trying. That's next.
It seems fairly flawed. I mean, his wife's calling him an adulterer all over the place, and, I think... I'm not quite sure if he's a felon, but it seems like at one point he was at risk of being convicted. So it's just a problematic candidate.
Yeah, I mean, that's an understatement. Trump and the people around him don't seem to be acting like they're attempting to win a Democratic election this fall, meaning like convince a majority of people to vote for them. And the moment, well, it's been pretty clear, but the sort of light bulb moment for me just in the last few days is his endorsement of Texas's scandal-plagued Attorney General Ken Paxton in the Texas Senate race over incumbent Senator John Cornyn, right? This is kind of the crystallizing example. The goal of the Trump apparatus right now appears to be quite clear: to use subterfuge, changes to election rules, including rigging the maps in the state's control, and the threat of force, if necessary, to retain power against Democratic will. They're doing basically nothing to try to appeal to the median voter. They don't think they need them. Trump gets in front of a microphone and says, I could care less, basically, more or less, every day. And everywhere you look, from the endorsement of Ken Paxton to the insurrectionist slush fund, which, by the way, what's that for? To the groundswell Republican gerrymandering across the country, it just seems clear as day that it's an all-out effort to use every means of questionable legality, possibly up to and including violent force and intimidation, as they did on January 6th, to barricade themselves in power against the will of the majority. Maurice Mitchell is the national director of the Working Families Party. Miles Tiller serves as the Chief of Staff of the Department of Homeland Security in the first Trump administration. He's the founder of Defiance.org, and they both join me now. I mean, there's a lot of ways you can interpret the PAC. I'll go to you first as sort of internal Republican politics. There are a lot of ways that you can interpret the Paxton endorsement, personal pique and all this stuff. But to me, it was like, if you really are like, I don't want to lose the Senate and I don't want to lose a House, that should weigh on you. And Trump is capable of making those sorts of decisions. We've seen him do it in all kinds of places. He can be kind of like weirdly disciplined, like he was about abortion in his messaging, right, during the campaign. That signaled to me like nothing they're doing looks like a party that's trying to win a majority. It looks like getting ready to stay in power no matter what the voters have to say.
Yeah, they say naive people wear, rose-colored glasses. Well, Donald Trump wears blood red glasses, and that's how he makes his decisions. Yeah. I mean, the reason that he didn't endorse Cornyn is so obvious. If Donald Trump is good at one thing, and I don't want to give him credit, but it's identifying people with a conscience and pushing them as far away as possible. And I also don't want to give Cornyn mountains of credit, but look, it's known on Capitol Hill that John Cornyn is a little bit more of a sober-minded Republican. He pushes back quietly against Trump stuff. I've traveled around the world with the guy. Yeah. He doesn't buy into all of this craziness. He also doesn't stand up against all of it, but Trump knows that. Right. He knows there's a little bit of a flicker of a conscience in there, and he says, yeah, we're not going to have that. I don't care if it means I'm going to lose. I got to get rid of that guy, and that naivete is going to cost his party this election.
But part of it is, there's a weird thing happening, Maurice, which is like the power over the Republican Party is growing in some ways while they're losing more and more of the country. I want to show this Quinnipiac poll today, which is wild. Trump has 34% approval rating. Like, we're starting to get into real bottom of the barrel kind of stuff. How much do you blame Trump for the gas prices rise? One of the questions in there. A lot, 55%. Some 17%, not much, 11, not at all, 16%. At the same time that this power is being exerted, they are losing the country at a level that we haven't seen since late Bush 2.
I actually see a relationship between, his dismal approval ratings and the fact that he's acting out. Like a lot of authoritarians, when they're desperate, they go into their authoritarian bag and they drop politics. They no longer take politics seriously. Right. And they begin to, change the rules. They begin to, start getting, street money out there with their brown shirts, which is what they're doing, exactly what he's doing.
Street money. It is. Yeah. That's what it is.
Yeah, it's 100%. So I'm unsurprised. And here's the thing. The more he loses power, the scarier some of his actions will be. And so he might give this impression that he's gaining power, but what I tell people is keep going. Every time he tries to do any overreach, we need to throw 2 more punches and go even harder. Yeah. His attempts to, steal voting rights from black folks, his attempts to now create this, and let's call it what it is reparations for his handpicked insurrectionists. Some of them are white supremacists. Yeah. This, to me, is a moment where we have to go full throttle. Like Harry Dunn is one of the other police officers that's a plaintiff on one of these cases. We just endorsed him today because he's one of those fighters who's going to the front and saying, in this time, we can't just kind of sit on our hands and allow this authoritarian to change the rules. We got to fight back.
One of the things that is worrying, I think, about this sort of, I think you're totally right. Like, the worse it gets, the more this attempt to sort of use strongman tactics. If you go back and you rerun 2020, right, it really was the case that at a bunch of key points there really were Republicans in positions of power or authority who did the right thing. Rusty Bowers in Arizona, the guy on the canvassing board in Wayne County, and then the Michigan canvass board. There were Republican-appointed judges who did the right thing. Like, really, in key moments, there were a few. Not a lot of profiles of courage in Washington, right? But that going after them, to me, spells something ominous about what the plan is here for the midterms.
But it also backfires. Yeah. People want good news. That is the story of what Donald Trump, it's almost the same playbook. In the midterms, in his first term, I was there in the administration. I watched him going after anti-MAGA people. But guess what? A lot of those people came back and opposed him in 2020. True. He fired cabinet members. He tried to punish people across the country. You know what they did? They persuaded Republicans to stay home or to vote for a Democrat for the first time in their lives. I mean, you just said you guys endorsed Harry Dunn tonight. He tried tried to defeat Thomas Massie this week to silence conversations about the Epstein files. Well, at Defiance.org, we just announced that we're putting the Epstein files on the road all summer, all the way till the midterm.
This is the physical reading room.
The physical reading room.
Yeah.
His revenge backfires.
Yeah.
Every time he tries to do this, people come and punch back. If you act like a thug, you're going to get treated like a thug.
I think part of it, too, is, I was just the other night was at an event with some of the folks from Minnesota. And, I really do think that when you look in sort of the trajectory of this last year, that was a real turning point, I think, when they really started to lose the country. Really lose the country with the deaths of Renee Good and Alex Preddy and with what people saw there and with the organizing that happened there. And I think a lot about the folks that came out in South Korea when, they ordered martial law to try to essentially hold on to power, and people that came out that night, that there's going to have to be some civic infrastructure built.
Yeah,
to prepare for whatever happens this fall, because I just do not trust that they want to have a free and fair election.
I mean, I have some good news. It's happening. People are having those conversations. And look, every plank of the struggle is, I think, being animated. Just yesterday in Philadelphia, we just came away from one of our best election days. And look, I do think the country no longer is embracing or feels like MAGA is anywhere near America First. I was in Allentown. Allentown, this is like a purple district.
And it's also like classic sort of 2016 Trump country, right? Like deindustrialized, working class white population, multiracial working class population, but a place where Trump has had success.
Yeah, and Bob Brooks won. He's a working class firefighter. Yeah. He ran on Medicare for All. Yeah. He's a Working Families Party candidate. He won his primary, and the same day in a very, very blue district, Rep. Rabb won his primary. Yeah. And they ran on similar issues, right? Because people are definitely afraid of what's coming to them with AI disruptions in the job market, the fact that people can't afford gas prices. There is this simmering populist sense of anxiety that people are tapping into, and I don't think it's going to bode well for Trump or MAGA.
The heavy-handedness backfiring is also interesting, both with the populace, right? Like I'm building my ballroom, I don't care, you peasants can go dig into the couch to buy more milk if you need, which is sort of his attitude. But also specifically, like the Cassidy thing right now and Cornyn. I mean, Cassidy's now a complete free agent. We saw him defect on the Iran war powers vote. I think Cornyn's probably going to lose this primary and be in the exact same situation as Cassidy, which is, that's 2 votes in the Senate. Like, so the attempts to discipline, I think, are going to make his ability to just push his will through both bodies of the legislature harder.
And there's only a 2 or 3 vote margin in
to
the
begin
House.
with. Yeah.
So, Thomas Massie was still staying with the administration on a number of issues. Right. They can't count on that anymore. Right. I mean, he was the first person when we talked, who should we have sit behind this?
Oh, that's a great point. Right. Right. I was like, oh, no, he's gone. But no, he's not gone. He's still there.
Thomas Massie driving the Trump Epstein mobile across the country. The revenge backfires for Donald Trump again and again. And we're also seeing it not just in Washington, though, Chris. I mean, around the country, prosecutors around this country in cities are saying if Donald Trump sends troops to the polls, ICE agents to the polls, they're going to sue those agents and put them in jail. Larry Krasner in Philadelphia, another Pennsylvania person, district attorney, said, if they do that, I'm putting those ICE agents in jail. People aren't scared of the administration anymore. They're standing up.
Maurice Mitchell, Miles Taylor, great to have you both. Thanks a lot. Still to come, the new reporting on Trump's mind-melting plan to put this guy back in charge. This one really, what can you say anymore? That's next.